Hey, welcome back to Grid Gym. Adam REES here. We're going to start out with a little story about Milo. Not Milo and Otis, but Milo was a Greek wrestler. And, well, for starters, Milo was an interesting character. So Milo gets, if you're into Greek philosophy at all or Greek stories or anything like that, Milo was this a Greek wrestler, and he was from Croton, and he was known for his feats of strength and how strong he was. He was also known for how much he could eat. Okay, those are the two big things. So he was known for being like just massively strong in his physique. He was known for being actually strong. He won the Olympics in wrestling 6 times, I think it was. Anyway, so how Milo got strong is the big thing for what we're going to talk about today, because this is about micro-loading. Micro-loading is basically taking like small, like tiny little increments. Like if you go up by 1 pound each month, let's say, that would be micro-loading. All right, when you first, like in your first 10 years of training, you don't have any business doing micro-loading. It just doesn't matter yet. There's a certain amount that's going to happen anyway, but you just take bigger jumps. Anyway, so Milo's going along. Milo's thing was that he, the way that he got his strength, or supposedly, is that he would pick up a calf every day. So a calf grows at about, so back in the day, I was in 4-H. All right, a lot of guys in Iowa and girls were in 4-H. 4-H was this deal where you grew livestock, and then you took it to the fair, you'd show it at the fair, and you'd weigh it in before and after. And so you had to bring it to the fair, weigh it in when it was young, and then like, I forget what it is, it's like 250 days later, you weigh it in again, and then and then they find the rate of gain over that period of time. Well, most calves will be around 3 pounds per day, all right? About 3 pounds per day is about what a calf will grow over that period of time. So if you think Milo like came up, and this is how he got strong, was he started out when he was young, and he'd pick up a calf once every day, and the next day he would pick it up. It would be 3 pounds heavier, right? And then the next day he'd pick it up, and it'd be about 3 pounds heavier, and he would keep picking it up over and over every day, and he'd keep getting stronger and stronger and stronger. There would be a point in that time where he no longer could pick that calf up. It would get too big. Now, what all the old men, this is funny because this is actually the first lesson in strength and conditioning that I ever had. These old dudes from my church where I grew up would tell me this is how to get strong. You take a calf and you put him on one side of a fence, and you crawl over and you put him on the other side of the fence, and you do that every day, and they would say you'll be amazed how big that calf will get before you can't pick him up over that fence anymore. I always thought that was really interesting. But then I found out about Milo, and I was like, well, this is kind of cool. So he picked this calf up every day, and once he got to the point where he couldn't pick the calf up anymore, he would start all over again with a new calf. So this is like a deload period, right? So he would go all the way back to the beginning with a new calf that was small, pick it up, next day, pick it up again, next day, pick it up again, next day, pick it up again. And it would be, in 1 week, if it's 3 pounds, in 1 week, that's over 20 pounds extra that he's picking up every week. So over the course of a month, that's over 80 pounds, right? Over 80 pounds difference in a month. Actually, if you're going by, like if it's 31 days, you take that times 3, so it's way more than 80. What is that? That's 93. So 3 pounds a day, and you get a lot stronger very quick. And once you get to a point where you can't pick that calf up anymore, then you start back over again. You can use this to weights in the weight room too. If you haven't noticed, that's how I'm going to use it. I'm wearing the shirt that I work out in today. You guys should have seen me a little bit ago. We went out, a cousin of mine from Texas that I don't get to see very often actually came up and worked out at the gym. It was really fun. And then we went to breakfast, and we've been shooting the shit since then. It's kind of nice just to take a long breakfast and talk with him. He's the only other, like we have a lot of athletes in our family, but he's the only other football player on that side of the family, so he and I had a lot to talk about. But anyway, so that was really fun. So I'm still wearing my gross ass shirt. Nasty, huh? Surprisingly, I don't think that bad. But 3 pounds a day would be a type of microload. Milo got stronger and stronger and stronger, and then he would also he would turn around and he would eat just massive amounts of food. So what can you learn from that story? Well, if you just have these small amounts of gains, you start back over in these small amounts of gains. Supposedly he would eat the calf after he was done picking it up every day for that amount of time. But something to be learned there. So what is microloading? Microloading would be a tiny little amount that you lift over time. Eric and I were going to do the show, but Eric, I think he's getting a little sick. He texted me a little bit ago and said he wasn't going to make it. So we were going to talk a little bit about microloading and how he does it. He's really big on microloading. He's been lifting for a very long time, so it's how he does it. But it would be basically you just do a 5 pound or a 1 pound incremental gain each time. But like if you think about the philosophy of how Milo did this, like pick up a load, pick up that resistance. I think there's a mindset thing and a strength thing here that is just a really big, I don't quite know how to get what's in my brain over to you guys, but I think there's a really big thing here on how you do this. Like you take responsibility for something, like you lift a load and all of a sudden you're able to pick yourself up that much more. You have something that you're terrified of and you do that thing anyway. You just grew your courage up that much more. You lifted a load. One of the things that I've realized in the past few years is that not everybody is this outrageously curious person like I am. However, one of the biggest questions in my head is it sounds judgmental when I say it out loud, but it's not. It's like, aren't you curious? Aren't you curious what your body has not tapped into? Aren't you curious about the vessel that you have? Like this being your vessel. This being your vessel, your brain and your body. Aren't you curious about what you have not tapped into yet? Are that's what I think of when I think of my own body. I'm just curious what it is capable of, how much better it could feel, how the betterment of your physical stature, the betterment of your mental capabilities. Like what can we do to not just optimize and make things just a little bit better, but how do we actually incremental change, of course, but how do we lift a load? And I don't think that we just, I think it's very easy to look at certain people, you look at like an Arnold Schwarzenegger and you're like, well, Arnold Schwarzenegger was always going to be Arnold Schwarzenegger. But no, like at one point, Arnold Schwarzenegger was a 4-year-old scared little boy. And at one point, he was terrified to do a movie. At one point, he was terrified to get on stage. At one point, he was terrified to start lifting weights. And it's easy to look at him and be like, well, that's just how he is. But at one point, he was not that way. I look back to like when I was a teenager and I thought adults had no clue what they were talking about. They weren't me. They were adults. Like when I was in elementary school, I thought the high school kids really had it all figured out. When I got to high school, I thought that adults really had it figured out. When I got to adulthood, I was like, man, these older people really know what they're doing. I should listen to them. And now that I'm a little bit older, I'm like, man, everybody's winging it to a certain extent. So like, what else can be learned? What else can be incrementally built upon? How do we lift the additional 3 pounds, the metaphorical and the actual physical 3 pounds every day? How do we push that envelope just slightly forward? There's a lot of questions going on here, and I don't know what the answers are. I don't think the show is about asking questions or about answering questions. I think it's about asking questions. I would much rather have just shitloads of questions. I don't know about you guys, but I would much rather have just tons of questions with no answers than all the answers with no questions. Because there's no curiosity in having all of the answers. We were talking about life and death with Bo when we were at breakfast, and there was a lot of that going on. Like, if you're wondering, like, if you're going to get around me, you're going to see that there's a lot of deep conversations. But to get back on topic, all right, you got 3 pounds a day. I'm not going to erase that. So you got 3 pounds a day that Milo put onto his of strength onto his body, and as soon as he couldn't lift that additional 3 pounds, then he stopped, because at some point we don't just get to keep on lifting more, right? And then he started all the way back at the beginning. So at the beginning, that calf might have weighed 200 pounds, let's say. By the time it's done, it might weigh 1,200 pounds. So he probably somewhere stopped in the middle there and wasn't able to lift anymore. Now, did he just stay right there and go to a different calf that weighed a little bit less? No, he started all the way back at the beginning. I think this is one of the things that we have to keep in mind when we're doing microloads, is that it doesn't feel like we're making very much progress, but you're making a lot of progress over time. So if you get 3 pounds a day, that's over 90 pounds a month. Okay, if you could put 100 pounds additional onto any of your lifts in a month, you are doing really well. You're doing crazy well. That's kind of insane. Unless you're a very, very beginner, you're probably not going to be able. I haven't put 100 pounds on a lift, I don't think, ever in my entire career. And I've been lifting for over 20 years now. It just doesn't really happen. It'd be cool if it did, though. All right, so micro loads, you put this little amount on every single day. It's not very complicated. I think where people get tripped up is that they do this and they do this and do this and they get to a point where they can't lift anymore, and then they try to stay at that same number instead of trying to stay right here. Go all the way back to the beginning and call that your deload. I think that's where everybody messes up. But really, from this, like let's say you're an okay deadlifter. Let's say that you're at 200 pounds. 200 is always my example, right? I'm going to switch out pins. You're at 200 pounds. This one's not much better, is it? You're at 200 pounds for your deadlift, and you want this to go up a little bit, and you've been lifting for 10 years. Well, for one, if you're at 200 pounds and you've been lifting for 10 years, we drastically screwed something up. So at least take this times 10 or times 90% to take 10% off. And we're going to use that number. So we're going to go down to 180, all right? And we're going to use that number. We're going to use 180. We're not going to use 200, okay? Use 180. Don't use 200. Always drop when you're doing the math of strength. Drop 10%. It's just really stupid to try to stay up above a certain level. So we drop. So we're going down 10% from 200 down to 180. All right, and now we're going to calculate off of that. So what you would do is, I think like a really good number probably to start out with would probably be something like 50%. So we're going to go clear down, and we're going to call it 95 because that's two 25s on each side of the bar, and that's pretty easy to do. All right, you do 95 pounds the first day. Then you do 100 pounds the next day. And then you do 105 pounds the next day. And then you do 110 pounds the next day. Okay, that's a really easy way to micro load and to break up your programming. And this is usually for somebody who's pretty experienced and has done quite a bit of stuff, and you maybe would only do this for like a month. Eric does this for like months and months and months and months because he's trying to move up like 5 pounds a month. But 5 pounds a month is pretty good because that's 60 pounds in a year. So it's still pretty good. But anyway, you would do this for however many days until you can't lift it anymore, which will probably be somewhere around 230. How did I come up with that number? I guessed. It'll probably be quite a bit more than 200 in a month, in just a month. You'll probably get up to somewhere around 230, but then you don't start there, you start all the way back down here. This is one way to do micro-loading. If you read Easy Strength, this is how Dan John does it. Dan John is a very, very smart guy. He does not think that you should do math. He thinks that you should go by feel. If you sit down, Dan John and I have sat down and actually talked about this. Dan John's also a legend, so I'm not disagreeing with him here. I'm posing a different perspective. So Dan John and I are talking about this, and I felt so grateful to be in that position to be able to actually have this discussion. But I was like, if we were going to go by percentages for somebody new, do you think, anyway, we went back and forth, and he's like, he agreed with me and I agree with him. He's talking about experienced lifters, so he goes by feel, not by percentage. And what he does is you're gonna do 3 lifts every day, and you're gonna do your deadlift, you're gonna do your bench, and you're gonna do your squat. And then you maybe have some accessory exercises in there. But I'll stay away from rep schemes too. So you're gonna do these. I'm gonna get rid of this. You're going to do these one every day, let's say for 5 days. Let's say he's going to go for like a month, and you only build up to a weight that feels really, really, really light, extremely light. So if you could do a 200 pound for a 1 rep max, maybe you work up to 135 the first day, maybe, and because 155 felt a little bit heavy, and then the next day you build up to 180, but your body didn't feel that great, so you back down and you ended up but you started at like 95, and then your body didn't feel that great and you only went to 155, and this day you only went to 95. The interesting thing is that when you do this out and you actually try this, by the end of the month, after you do this for 4 weeks, at that last month, you only lift 3 days, and on Monday you do let's say you do deadlift. On Wednesday, let's say you do bench, and on Friday, let's say you do squat, right? What you'll find and if you build up to a 1 rep max on each one of these days, you guys probably can't read this because this marker, I need to get it replaced. But what you'll find is that you'll blow your old numbers away. And this is a version of microloading too. So we stayed very, very far below the actual amount that we can lift. And then all of a sudden we're able to do way more than we could before because the body got coaxed along. You have to coax the gain. You're not trying to submit the body to your will. You're trying to coax it along. There's a big difference here. We don't want to submit the body. The body doesn't like getting the shit kicked out of it. And you shouldn't expect to for the body to give you what you want when you've just beaten it to death. Your body wants to be led. Come here, come here, come here. And when you give it this kind of thing, what we just went through, it's coaxing it along. Maxing it out every day is just beating it up. But anyway, there's a couple different ways that we can microload. The story of Milo is a very good example of microloading. He picked up a calf every single day, and that calf probably grew at about 3 pounds per day. And because of that, Milo got a little bit stronger, and he started all the way back to the beginning. I don't know if it would actually work. I hope it would. I like the story of Milo. The interesting thing is Milo's most popular thing is that one of the things that he could do, supposedly, was he could rip a tree stump in half. And so one day when he was doing that, he got his hand stuck and he got eaten by wolves, and that's how he died. Which is, I've always kind of wondered why that's the story he gets known for. Not his feats of strength, not how he got strong, not how much he could eat, but that his hands got stuck in a tree stump and he couldn't get away from the wolves. I think that's kind of interesting. But I really like the story of Milo and microloading and how he got strong. It's a good one. But I really think, like, what do you have inside of you that is untapped? Like, what could your body do if you stopped brushing off that pain in your shoulder like I did for so long? What could your body do if you stopped brushing off, oh, I'm just old because I'm 42 and my back hurts sometimes. Your back should not hurt when you're 42. Aches and pains should be minimal throughout your entire life. Like I've told you this many, many times. I want to be strong and to the bitter end and drop dead. I don't want to have any in between. But what the point, the story of Milo, I think what it really is about is lift a load. Like mentally lift a load. Courage is lifting a load. Taking responsibility is lifting a load. Learning something new is lifting a load. Taking a challenge is lifting a load. There's a lot of different things that are a way of lifting a load. This is why I think strength training is such a good medium to train mindset, because you are literally lifting a load and doing things that you thought were impossible. But anyway, I hope you guys got something out of this. Thanks for being here. I really appreciate it. You cannot read the board at all, can you? I really got to get some new stuff. Did you guys like my t-shirt? This is one of my favorite ones. I love this t-shirt. This is what Rocky wears in Rocky 2, which is one of my favorite movies. But anyway, thanks for being here. Really appreciate it. We'll be back tomorrow.